What's up, Madridistas? This is Kiyan Sobhani. Happy Friday. We just wanted to get a clip out for you guys today. It's taken from this week's mailbag. As you guys know, once a week over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, we answer questions that are submitted through our Discord, and we always have fun doing it because the questions take us in so many different directions, and it's usually Lucas Navarrete and I who answer the questions. He's away this week in the USA, having the time of his life. Looks like he's having a fun time on Instagram stories anyway. So Jose Perez stepped in and we answered a bunch of questions. This particular clip is about Real Madrid's financial situation. Are we worried? How will they compete with the unrecognizable football and financial landscape that is in 2023 from what we were used to growing up? And will Real Madrid ever switch to private ownership? That would be a dark day. Jose and I discussed that. There's also a little bonus segment in there about Jurgen Klopp and whether or not he would be a good fit at Real Madrid one day. And the full episode, we get into a bunch of things. We talk about Vinicius' struggles in the diamond, something that both Jose and I feel is a bit exaggerated. We explain why. We also get into Jude Bellingham player comps and our thoughts on Gabriel Veiga going to Saudi Arabia. So full episode is in the show notes if you want access to it. We also did a great live call on Wednesday. That's another weekly thing that patrons get. So hope to see you on the inside over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. And as always, please keep it locked on managingmadrid.com. Canita did an excellent piece summarizing the Rubiales situation. That actually went up last night, which was Thursday. Today, he disgraced himself even further. I'm sure you guys have all seen the images, heard the words. Just embarrassing. He's a shameless bastard. And hopefully it gets sorted out soon. Updates on that will also be on the website, hopefully by the time you listen to this. Also on the website, a couple tactical articles, one from me, one from Mehdi Hassan, talking points from the first couple games, and a ton of content, of course, coming your way after the game. Enjoy the clip. Let's go. And Maza says, Madrid, in comparison to many clubs, has seen very few trophy droughts. With the emergence of the Saudi Pro League, the Premier League having state ownership and massive TV deals, and what seems the inevitable dark ages coming for La Liga, can Madrid sustain this level long term without switching to private ownership? What are your feelings about this?
I'd like to take this. I like to take this one first. So that this one's a very interesting one because, of course, one wonders. I mean, those are all forces that seem to be acting against La Liga, but in general, Real Madrid, well, and even Barcelona, despite the financial issues, are outliers. Well, on several things. Like, first of all, the pool that these two clubs have, regardless of their regardless of financial status, is kind of incredible. Like I do think that even now, Real Madrid and Barcelona can pool play. Like, of course, the Premier League clubs and the petro state funded clubs can offer a lot of money, but the pool that these two clubs can still have over top players is kind of incredible due to all the history and all the success of both clubs. So that's one of the advantages. Then the other thing that I would point out is that there are, as Barcelona has shown, there's always some financial engineering that you can do to remain competitive, because whatever complaints one can have about Barcelona's use of palancas, I mean, for the most part, they managed to remain within regulation, and it helped them win the league. So there are those. Sometimes, like I was thinking, it's like, okay, so at this point, if you're a football club, like, what do you spend money on? Okay, so a good recruitment department. How about you spend that money on like really smart accountants and finance people who can figure out the loopholes in the rules? I mean, Chelsea has probably like a big department of lawyers figuring out that kind of stuff right now. So that's an edge that you can also use. to remain competitive. And yeah, and then there's the third thing that I'd like to point out, which is that Real Madrid is trying to find other sources of income. And by this, I mean the whole commercial side of the stadium project. And of course, if the projections that the club has given are correct, then that's going to be an extra. Okay, so due to the deal with Sixth Street, 30% of those. Well, it's not 30% of the 250. But like I still think the club can make even though they ceded some of the rights, can still make like 200 a year from those from the new stadium. That's a lot of money. Like that's a lot of money. And if those projections are correct, this would be a huge competitive boost for Real Madrid. So, given all of those factors, I think it's very. I just don't see the switch to private ownership needed anytime in the near future. Like if we've done this 10, like if we've done all of the things I said before for 10 years, and then we see it doesn't work, then maybe one can have a discussion about it. But right now, switching to private ownership is like at the very bottom of the things that the club needs to do to remain competitive.
Well, so the Sixth Street deal, just to put it in numbers, after the cut is an additional 100 million revenue. That's after Sixth Street's cut, because there was a baseline guarantee, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you remember, it wasn't just a percentage. There was also a baseline minimum that Sixth Street has to pay Real Madrid annually. And of course, we've already, like when we first saw the deal, and you also see who Sixth Street is partners with, from UFC to a bunch of American sports teams. They do some tennis too, I think Wimbledon. You're like, oh wow, that's really cool to have that stuff in the Bernabeu, and then you finally see it actually happening, like Taylor Swift coming to the Bernabeu. That alone should be able to fund some.
You buy you buy like 2 Mbappes out of that.
Taylor Swift in one night can buy 2 Mbappes. I actually wonder how much they make from that, because we know Taylor Swift herself takes a huge portion of the money that comes in with those ticket sales. But that's a different story. So there's things like that. I actually wonder with Barca, because you mentioned it did help them win La Liga. Of course it did. They also had budgeted with all their levers that will make the Champions League quarterfinals, and they failed to do that. They missed out a huge lot of prize money. So it was always going to be a massive risk to pull those levers and maybe not be able to recoup it. Because I think their initial thought process was like, okay, we improve our squad, we take all these gambles, but in improving the squad short term, we win trophies, we get far in the Champions League, we recoup that prize money with the additional revenue, we'll buy back our rights that we've sold. And I don't know if that necessarily will happen now. And I think they would. What do you think, Jose? I think they would redo some of those. Like, I don't think they would do Ferran Torres again if they knew how he turned out, right? That's one.
Yeah.
Were there any others?
I think the biggest one that I think about a lot of the time is Ferran. The way I saw it, they had like one winger too many. It's like out of Ferran, Rafinha, Dembele, you choose 2 of them, but and I would say, okay, so you had to choose, so you had to discard one of the ones that cost 60 million, which were Ferran or Rafinha. So one of them seemed unnecessary. The Lewandowski gamble, I think, was more reasonable, and it certainly helped. Like, that being said, we'll see if Lewandowski can recover, but it's looking a bit like it's looking more short term than I thought. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And you can kind of see the dominoes of that this summer. They've spent 3 million so far. And I don't know how much that changes in the rest of the window. The last part of this question, can Madrid sustain this level long-term without switching to private ownership? What are your feelings? I think they can. I think they have a long-term blueprint with a lot of money coming in and additional revenue.
Yep.
No, they don't have the infinite pockets of Saudi Arabia, but they have a marketing machine, and they do a lot of great business deals. I'm not worried about Real Madrid. I've said this many times. I'm worried about La Liga, not Real Madrid. But of course, having La Liga in a bad state is not good for Real Madrid either. So it's not that it doesn't affect them; it does. And I sincerely hope that Madrid never switches to private ownership. I feel like that'll be a really sad day if that ever happens. I like what system we have now. It's not to say that every president in every era will be great. Certainly not. But the great thing is that you can vote out those presidents after X amount of years, and we can vote a new one in. Vote is a generous term for Florentino running by himself every time, but you get my drift. All right, interesting. Ranta says Jurgen Klopp doesn't look like he's interested in the job, but since we are signing all his dream midfielders, do you think there's any chance he will join us in the future? Is he the coach who could get the most out of the potential of our midfield?
So this one's fun because I get where he's going at, and if we're on, and to be honest, I mean, Real Madrid, especially now that look at how they're playing the last couple games, like a very high intensity approach with midfielders with great physical and technical ability. You would think like that kind of high intensity approach looks like it would be a really nice fit for Jurgen Klopp. But personally, I'm not that much of a fan of Klopp in the context of Real Madrid. The main reason being that he's a bit more, like, say, compared to Zidane, Ancelotti, the kind of coach Del Bosque, the kind of coach who's usually really succeeded here at Real Madrid. He's a bit more rigid when it comes to the style, and I think in Real Madrid, you need a bit more flexibility in that regard. That would be my main concern.
That's interesting. I thought you were going to take it into a different direction and talk about he doesn't have the man-manager side of things, which I think he does.
I think he does.
Yeah, but you brought up a different point, which is interesting, is that he's more tactically rigid.
Yes.
Than Ancelotti and Zidane, which I think that's something that Ancelotti and Zidane both had. They were very flexible and they were very malleable in their identity based on the situation. I'd love to see Klopp, what he could do with this team personally, if I'm being quite frank. In terms of if you were to implement a successful version of his rigid football, I feel like we have the midfield legs to do it, right? The infinite pressing machine from 1 to 90 at the peak of what they were doing in Liverpool. We have the athletic ability and the depth in midfield to do that. So I'd be interested for sure. It's funny because like you look at Liverpool and Klopp, and we always talk, I feel, about these in these terms of the Premier League is thriving in their own Super League. But it's funny, and I mentioned this on yesterday's podcast, that within the Premier League, you have teams that are suffering because of this. Like Liverpool can't compete with City and Newcastle when it comes to signing. And you look at how much more difficult it is for Klopp to sign the players he wants compared to those other teams. And, it kind of sucks for teams like them and Tottenham who are not getting, the share of the other teams like Newcastle and City.
Yeah, and also for teams like them, like every gamble that fails in terms of transfers is difficult to recover from. Like Newcastle and City can recover from bad transfers. For Liverpool, that's more difficult. The other thing that I'd like to add is that while I did talk about him being a bit more rigid, I also think, okay, let's ignore all the Barcelona history. Would I have Guardiola in Real Madrid? Gladly. Even though I also consider him maybe a bit more on the system side of coaches. And I think, despite my concerns, I think Guardiola and Klopp are probably the best managers I can think of when it comes to implementing systems. And I think if there are, like, generally Real Madrid has been like a players over system club. So I am a bit afraid of having system managers at Real Madrid. But if there are two coaches that I think are capable of doing it, even in the Real Madrid context, it would be Klopp and Guardiola.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I have this debate obviously with Diego all the time. And he says there's only one way to play football. This is it. Everyone else is basically inferior. I'm paraphrasing, but this is really how these guys think, right? And I would say, like, I'm really thankful for our tactical versatility because I don't think we win as many Champions League titles as we do without it. And I think when you say players above system, I think what that also means is that we cater to our best players. And
Yep.
It's funny. I'm in the Hugo Sanchez part of my book right now. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you'll probably see that with my Hugo Sanchez tweets. But the no nonsense verticality he would play with and scoring with one touch, the fans loved him because there was no nonsense. It wasn't dallying on the ball. It wasn't anything like, take a touch, dribble, multiple passes, work the ball around. It was like, just get the ball in the back of the net as quickly as possible. And Jorge Valdano once spoke about this too in one of his columns, where he said Real Madrid's identity is point A to point B as quick as possible. That's it. And I thought that always stuck with me. And Matt sometimes brings that up on the podcast too. And yeah, I think the versatility is really handy. And you can see the track record, between Pep even or Barca compared to that of Real Madrid. And you think back to some of the quarterfinals, Pep versus Ancelotti in 2014, for example, Bayern versus Real Madrid, where we sat back. Bayern had no idea how to get into our box, and we just murdered them on the counterattack. And would Pep or Xavi ever play that way? I doubt it. There are situations where, because of the game state, they are forced to. Like, you think back to Pep versus Atletico a couple years ago, I think it was. I don't remember. Again, time is blurry, but but those are situations where I don't think that was big by design. They were just pinned. So I'm thankful for it.